Welcome back, and here comes a discussion that seems to be everlasting in this country: endemic corruption. And of course, it's not that we don't have cases go to court, but then can the courts really save Nigerians in Nigeria? Do we get the outcome that we truly want? A lot of people say, oh, these cases are swept under the carpet. If you're dining or partying with the party of the day, then you get away with a lot of things. High-profile cases here and there, and to what end?
There are those who have also said that, I think, remember former finance minister and coordinating minister of the economy, Okonjo, where I say, when you fight corruption will fight back.
You fight back.
And one way that we fight corruption is through legal means.
Yes.
The EFCC is an anti-corruption agency. ICPC is an anti-corruption agency. The police, in fact, every security agency is an anti-corruption agency. NDLA is an anti-corruption agency. The question you want to ask is, how well have they been able to do? How well are they doing? Do they get convictions? Of course they get convictions. I remember we spoke with Mr. Femi Babafemi, spokesperson of the EFCC recently, that, I was asking, Oga, you continue to go after the minions. How about going after the big boys? He said they always go after the big boys, and they caught some of them. That's encouraging, but are we able to deal with it decisively? That's the question. Is there any more that the courts can do than they're doing already?
And so we have to talk about these issues today. We have joining us virtually Mr. Dapo Akinyosun, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Then we have Dr. Olugbenga Adeoye, Chartered Accountant, Tax Expert, Arbiter, International Business Lawyer, President, Egba Economic Summit Group. I just had to read all of that.
You have to. You have to.
He joins us in the studio. Thank you. And he's looking very Egba-ish this morning,
Thank you for having me.
And then we have Mr. Sulaiman Arigbabu, Executive Secretary, Head of Resource Center, who's also joined us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and Mr. Akinyosun online. But let me start with you, because so that we can just hear your voice, since you're not here in the studio with you, Mr. Akinyosun. Your thoughts about this endemic corruption, and how much reliance really we can have on the courts. Let's just stick with our title for today. Can the courts really save Nigeria? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? How reliable, are these court cases when we're dealing with corruption? Are we getting, the results that we truly want to get when we talk about these high-profile cases?
Good morning, and thank you for having me here today. I think the courts are doing very well within the ambits of what they're supposed to do. You find that many of the recoveries that are done have to go through the legal means. The law, the AJCA, the EFCC Act all go back to one fact, that you must get a court order to forfeit. The challenge with the court system we find is that those who are taking loads of money can afford the best lawyers, and those lawyers will come to court a lot of the time to challenge the process and in what they call testing the law, have delayed a lot of the recoveries. But within the ambits of the law, and you will find the EFCC and ICPC are doing quite a lot and have recovered interesting and outstanding amounts of property and monies. The issue you then find that they are also now saddled with the task of how do we manage these properties between the interim forfeiture and final forfeiture, and what do we do with them after? And those are the areas where I think the law is not very clear, but the agencies are actually doing quite a lot in getting recoveries for properties and stolen monies. I think they're doing a lot in that regard.
My question, let me bring it to you, Dr. Adeoye. I don't even know how to put the question, but here is it. A good number of times, perhaps Mr. Akosho has raised an issue of some limitations that the judiciary itself has. But is that all about it? We know that there are efforts, serious efforts being made by security agencies. I have heard it said that in some cases, the fight is fought, victory is achieved, but then those people who are convicted or whatever somehow find themselves back in society and all of that. So it begs the question whether or not, the law, after doing its own, is able to sustain its success.
Okay. Let me say that corruption is not new. It has been before Jesus was born. In the year 500 BC, before Christ, there was a case in Persia, the current day Iran, where there was a judge, Sisamnes, who was found to have received bribe, and then he gave unfair judgment, and that was during the reign of Cambyses II. And then the king summoned this judge and asked him to name a successor. As corrupt as he was, that judge, he named his son, Otanes, to replace him. And then the judgment was that the man be skinned alive. When we were in law school and this matter came in ethics class, I was afraid of the kind of justice system there. And then not only that, the skin that was removed from this man was used to do the upholstery work of the chair that the new judge will sit. That's his son. Now, throughout his reign as a judge, every sitting, every proceeding, he was always referring to the seat that the upholstery was made from his father's skin. And record has it that he was fair and equitable and he was never corrupt. So let me say that the problem we have, just like Ayo was mentioning, is that there are no consequences. And if there are consequences, the consequences are not too serious. Just as early as last week, I had a meeting with a group of businessmen, and one of our friends, Wale, said, a nation is doomed where public officers are richer than job creators. So I leave that for you to analyze. So, the people that continue to be corrupt, why they continue is because they saw 5 years ago someone who stole 50 billion is now moving around. So, and they feel, let me steal 100 billion. I also say that it's also about mindset we need to work on from primary to secondary to higher institution, because you don't actually need all of this money that you are stealing. If you spend 1 million naira every day, for the next 50 years, you will spend 18,250 million. And so, for the next 100 years, you probably spend 36,500 million. Therefore, what do you want to do with all of this money? So, I would say consequences that were not there. Because maybe if we have time, we can look at how Singapore handled corruption in their country. 4 principles they adopted, and they were successful. China also, even as early as this year, there were people that have been sentenced to death. And there were people that have been sentenced to life imprisonment for $325,000 bribe. So, consequence is a problem. Bad mindset is another problem. And you cannot, I am a lawyer, I will not sit here to blame the judges for inability to recover. Because even the case of the loot that you find in the hands of some officials of government, which is, you were mentioning the case of Malami or something recently, is that the recovery that the anti-graft agency were able to make, some people cornered the recovery to themselves. So corruption taking place within anti-corruption activities.
Well, Mr. Ribabu, perhaps we are, as important as it is to talk about high-profile cases, we tend to ignore the roots. There is no tree that grows from leaves. It grows from the roots. So perhaps society has a thing or two to do about it. There are those who would point to the complicity, and I am sorry to mention you guys, civil service. Politicians operate in civil service. They are public servants, they operate with civil servants and all of that. And there are those who say that a PermSec, for instance, whether it be at the federal or state level, that's the COO. That's the person who knows where everything happens, and if the person is going to, if there is going to be any corruption or whatever, that guy knows where the yam is buried, the knife, and everything about it. So, do you think, if we don't look at it, do you think we are fighting corruption the way we should, or are we being proactive about it or reactive?
Thank you very much. Let's be specific. We are not proactive about fighting corruption. You see, in Nigeria, when we think that a problem is huge, we rise up and deal with it. So when Ebola came, the society rose up and dealt with it. COVID, we did our best. When we have, as election is coming now, you can see the way the courts are dispatching litigations by parties. We go to the National Assembly and get laws passed because we see election as very, very important, as critical. So when we think that a problem is something we need to deal with, we rise, well, because we do not understand that Nigeria don't have any problem. We don't have education problem, we don't have insecurity problem, we don't have health problem, we don't have food problem. The only problem we have is corruption. And corruption stays because not only is the system not able to prevent it, but there are no consequences, like Mr. Adeoye have said. So we do not deal with corruption, we do not give it the kind of attention it deserves. Look at, for instance, once these elections are over and parties have issues to litigate about, they go to tribunal, we have specified within certain time it should be done. But we see people steal money that has caused death. Somebody was telling me yesterday that if you take the cost of Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, for instance, if you give it price X, somebody has stolen more than that. And it means that that person has stolen a whole entire Lagos-Ibadan Express Road. But inclusive of all the lives that would have been lost and limbs that have been lost because they didn't do the right thing. I'm just using that as an example. So the reality is that we do not see corruption. For instance, people have corruption cases in court for 10, 20 years. And even when you eventually get conviction, the politicians have the power, the president, for instance, have the prerogative of mercy, and the person will be told to go and sin no more. So just like you are alluding to earlier, so even when the system, the judiciary and the anti-corruption system, culminate into conviction and we expect that consequence is not happening, the politicians can turn it around. So the problem is that we do not see corruption as the cancer.
The politicians can't do it single-handedly, can they?
Well, unfortunately,
it's systemic.
They do it single-handedly because the law empowers them to do it. So where we started this from is that is the judiciary doing enough? The judiciary do not exist in a vacuum. It operates under laws that have been enacted. So take, for instance, the Senate is recently talking about withdrawing and reviewing the Proceeds of Crime Act. Now that's a major issue because there is already provision in the laws establishing all these anti-corruption agencies on how to deal with forfeitures, proceeds of crime. Now the immediate past Attorney General, who a lot was recovered from recently, at some point formed one funny committee to say they are going to be dealing, and we took him to court. And the courts upheld our position that no, you don't have to do that. Because their eyes, you know the way you say on the street, their eyes, they shook inside some of this, you know, loot. They want to re-loot the loot. You know, and the court said, no, you can't do that. They just went to the appeal court, filed an appeal, and hung it there. So now if the Senate is saying they want to establish an entity to deal with process of, is another avenue for re-looting recovered loot. Okay. And that is one thing we must fight against. So in Nigeria, we're not proactive enough.
Okay. Well, Mr. Akiosun, you heard that. I don't know whether or not you agree with that. The court is, I think, the court is a reaction. The court, I don't know, you may speak to it. The court, I'm not sure, perhaps except the Supreme Court. The courts, I think, are the reactions of people. The court doesn't initiate these legal approaches, do they? The courts are approached for arbitration or whatever you call it. So the court really just sits there and waits. You bring the case, there's adjudication, and then there's judgment, and then there's execution, and all of that. So when we are asking the question whether or not the courts can save the country, I don't know what you want to say about that. But there is an issue that has been raised. Perhaps there are some cases that don't need to go to court if the process was strong and standing. For instance, the one that Mr. Aribabu just mentioned of the process of re-looting the loot. When loot is recovered by the state, isn't there supposed to be a conduit through which it goes back to the state, back to some purse, some storage, whether it's hard stuff or small stuff? We hear that there's been a recovery of some estates here and there, some houses and all. Shouldn't there be a system that warehouses all of this loot and recycles it in governance?
Thanks. You see, under the AJCA, the law actually says that properties that are recovered can be sold, should be auctioned, and the money is paid to the consolidated revenue fund of government. So there is a process that enables EFCC to run an auction. And what you find, or what we found happened in the last administration, was an attempt by those in authority to reloot. It is not that the law doesn't provide for a way to do that. Yes, the law can be more robust, but sometimes I think the creation of another agency to manage that, why can't you leave it to the people who recovered it to also find a way to dispose of it? Because what they have recovered is assets or property. They can convert it to cash within themselves, and then the proceeds paid to government. I believe somewhere in the law as well, even if it is recovered abroad, there is a process for paying the monies back to government, and if it is an asset, then there is a way that it is brought back to the consolidated revenue fund of the federation. But I don't think it is because the agent, or there's no law to support it. It is more from the fact that those who are in power, those who are in authority, are the ones who tend to abuse it. And sometimes I wonder if Nigerians just don't have a sense of history. Because you have seen it happen to people before you, that the monies get recovered, they get prosecuted, but yet the person coming next happens to fall into the same pattern. And like you mentioned earlier, could it be that the civil servants who are guiding them are the ones who lead them astray? Because if the civil servants do not aid or abet them, it is very unlikely that the man who's coming from outside will suddenly know how to pass it. We have seen situations where a minister was misled by civil servants around her to dealing with monies in the manner she was not supposed to do it. That was clear. And you could see the integrity of the officer by resigning at that time. And you will see that some are rather happy to walk along with those who are guiding them wrongly. And as long as the person they're guiding has an intention to make monies that is outside his income, then you would always find that corruption will continue unabated.
Well, Mr. Akiosun, is that process being followed proactively? we know our weakness, we know our vulnerability as a people. So if the process existed, is it being followed as it should? If it is not being followed as it should, is there a system that checks it to ensure that the needful is done? Because in another 10, 20 years, we will still be talking about the same thing if we're not careful.
Yeah, I mean, I think EFCC sometimes have been slowed down from doing this, from completing the process because of having to consult with executive arm of leadership. As was mentioned, if the Attorney General, who is a coordinating or supervising ministry over the EFCC, has an Attorney General that says, hey, wait, don't send it yet. We have to do a committee. And I know in time past, they've actually listed and engaged auctioneers, went through a process of selecting licensed auctioneers to do this. So the process is being followed. They may not be doing it as quickly or as often as maybe, but at the same time, there are appeals on many of those assets that are recovered, and until they go through the final appellate process, they cannot start dealing with them.
Okay.
Because final forfeiture at High Court can still be challenged at Court of Appeal up to the Supreme Court. As we saw recently that a judgment, I think, was given just yesterday or day before on the assets of a former CBN governor. And you find that until it got to Supreme Court, the EFCC may not be able to deal with it in a speedy manner.
Well, I know that Joke has a question, but let me quickly ask you, Dr. Ade, is the judiciary at risk of entrapment?
Yeah.
Because there are some cases that maybe it's not so common, but common sense would say that they shouldn't even go as far as the court. We know the right thing to do as human beings who have common sense. So is the court, is the judiciary itself in jeopardy when we are expecting the judiciary to do what society cannot do for itself?
So, because we are operating a democracy, it's not a military government where the leader can issue a decree and ask that somebody be hanged or killed. So the court system is important. But where we got it wrong, if you look at what they did in Singapore, they have the CPIB, Corrupt Practice Investigation Bureau, that allow anti-graft agency to investigate anybody, and then they report directly to the Prime Minister. Then they have the PCA, the Prevention of Corrupt Act, that allow you to check the bank account of family members of public officers, their relatives, at any time. So, what we didn't get right, the two other measures was that they benchmark the salary of public officers and civil servants to be the same with the highest in private sector, and then they simplify the bureaucratic system. So, you don't have grease money being paid because somebody is trying to play you. Now, the challenge we have, you heard the learned Sikh talking about going to Supreme Court. We are getting it wrong. We should have a corruption court that have one trial court and one appellate court. And then the proceeding should not last more than 6 months. The trial, 3 months. The appeal, 3 months. So you have a corruption court that will have the power of a high court, and then the appellate court will be like Supreme Court and appeal court combined together, and the decision there will be final. Now, because of these loopholes and the pressure on the justices, the corrupt people, they play on our intelligence. There could be interlocutory injunction that will be tried up to Supreme Court. And then when the decision is made, you return to trial court, begin again. The dispensation will end. And so that's the challenge we have. So we need to do a reform to have a corruption court in place. In fact, if possible, it should just be one court. But because there could be errors in decisions, so you just have one appellate court that combines the power of appeal court and the Supreme Court. Then you have specialized judges trained to be there. People who have knowledge of forensic accounting, who understand movement of funds and so on. And by the way, there is no way you can steal. And this money, I mean, in Singapore, they even use lifestyle to investigate you. Lifestyle is part of the trigger.
So go to club too much.
Yes, you are a public officer, and then we just saw that, okay, before you live in a room and parlor building, now that you have this position, the next is that you just bought a Maybach of 500 million. We saw you at the club where you buy wine of 3 million. That lifestyle alone, and they have the intelligence officers deployed around the country. That was how they tackled this in Singapore.
That is on the condition that they will not, it will not become another political case.
So, do you agree with this, Janice?
I strongly advocate that we need to put a time lap to prosecuting corruption cases. If we don't do that, the people who steal our money, they are, you know, in Nigeria, all you need to do is make sure you steal well, make sure you hire the best hands, and be in the right circles. It could be a political party, it could be fraternity, it could be anything. Then you will most likely get away from justice. And we are not as helpless as it might seem, because in following the unexplained wealth order of the UK, we have something similar. For instance, these forfeitures have just been done. It is under the non-conviction assets forfeiture powers of the anti-corruption agencies, meaning that we can look at somebody and say, can you explain to us how you got this? EFCC uses that a lot, but unfortunately mostly against Yahoo boys. They need to step it up to working on politically exposed people, not just them, civil servants, and also people in the private sector, because nobody in public sector steals on their own. It has to be with connivance of people, especially the banks and other such service providers. So we are not as helpless. It's just that if you have enough powers, you can, frustrate the system. You can have one small matter, not the real substance of your matter, go to the Supreme Court, and 5 years, the person is still enjoying. After a while, you see people who are supposed to be facing corruption charges being appointed as ambassadors, being appointed as head of this, head of that. They are now leaders of political parties. So that's where the problem is. There are no consequences. This administration has not shown enough resolve to fight corruption. We had a lot of hope that the Buhari government will fight corruption to its standstill. But unfortunately, the first problem it had was in appointing the worst attorney general that anybody could imagine, who used all his powers as attorney general to actually obstruct the fight against corruption. Now, one would have expected that this government will come. I mean, the gentleman attorney general, the LANEX, come with a lot of respectability and a lot of expectation from people. But we have not seen him deploying the powers of the attorney general to really do what we expect for this country.
Could politics or political influence be an impediment? Because there are always, it seems there are always political considerations for every decision that any government has to take.
It is the reason why there is impunity. We have once heard that, if you're in the right party, then all your sins are forgiven. And that's the reality. If you're still in Nigeria, if you have enough money to slow down the wheel of the judicial process, you are likely to get away with it. If you are in the right party, even after conviction, you can be pardoned. So there are some of our laws that we need to review. For instance, the powers of the president to actually say, okay, they are given state pardon. There should be some crimes that even if you are given state pardon, it can only probably reduce your sentence, but it should not remove you from the black book of the society. We need to have a black book. For instance, we have had for some years now the compendium on 100 most corrupt cases. And you see that many of the people who have reported on in the last 9 years have gone back into society as big men, as people who come on TV to talk about this, about that. So it means that we have, one, a very short memory, and two, we are such a tolerant society that people do whatever, and once the next scandal bursts, we'll forget the previous one.
Maybe we are just forgiving.
We are really over-forgiving.
or just the happy people. So, if I had to come to you, do you think, how much faster do you think this process can be? I know that you advocate for maybe a corruption court that's solely for that reason. But how many of these branches, would be established? Would it be just unique? Maybe the court is just located in one state, for example, because we have multiple courts across the country that have jurisdiction, for different cases and different people. So how do you think that will work if we are to establish a corruption court? First, it has to go through legislation. They have to do this, do that, pass bill, do all sorts of things. So, I mean, how quickly do you think that can work, and how much faster do you think corruption cases can be executed if indeed we do have that?
Actually, there could be a procedural guidelines, and then you can do it administratively. For example, in Lagos State, Lagos is leading in terms of judiciary, and I give kudos to Lagos State and for what Professor Yemi Osinbajo did when he was Attorney General of Lagos State. In Lagos State here, there is a commercial court at Tapa on Lagos Island. Therefore, there are cases that you don't just dump with a particular court. So within the court system that we have, without necessarily building another one, we can actually pick judges, train them with the intention that you are going to deal with anti-corruption issues, and then the files will be moved to those courts. However, it doesn't take much time to get this law passed. The executive can sponsor a bill now, and they give it accelerated hearing in the National Assembly that, look, we're wasting too much time to attend to this. And by the way, these cases are disturbing other commercial transaction businesses. So let's just have corruption courts. And 6 months is, long enough to take decision. Because even here, after final written address in courts now, is 90 days. The judges have to give their judgment. And you see, because of vacation coming, some judges are saying, we're not going to take matters that is going to final written address. Let's just bring cases for mention and so on, because they know they are watching them if they don't give judgment. So we can do the same. 3 months for trial court, appellate court, 1. This bill that they are going to send to the National Assembly, 2 pages, right? It's gone. And then they sit and say, look, we just want to take these people to this place. We don't want them to contaminate other civil proceedings and so on. Just like we have electoral matters, we have election petition tribunal, duly set up.
But isn't that okay? Let me ask, Mr. Akinsho, this proposition that Dr. Adeoye is making. We have the Code of Conduct Bureau and the Code of Conduct Tribunal. I don't know if you think that has any play in what we are talking about here, particularly in the proposition that Dr. Adeoye is making.
Dr. Adeoye's suggestion is brilliant, but specialized courts without judicial officers that are incorruptible is also going to be a joke. And he had said something earlier about how we can actually breach corruption. First of all, is that those who are empowered to do the fight must also be very well remunerated. That makes it unattractive for them to be corrupted. If judges are paid the same thing as members of the legislature are paid, different cadres, House of Reps, Judge of High Court, Senate, Judges of Supreme Court, and things like that, you will find that the reasons to be corrupt are reduced. If they are well remunerated and they are one that, look, after this, don't go and do it. Then, as you also mentioned, what you will find is that what is the body language you get from the top? If the top of the country says, this fight against corruption must stop, all these people, you have stolen before, but still no more. Look at what happened when the president found that security apparatus was not working well enough. He sacked everybody in the top of the military hierarchy And you can see a renewed vigor in the fight against insecurity. If the man at the top says, look, a finger has been pointed at you as being corrupt, my friend, step down, and if you are found guilty, you are immediately tried. We can see the fight against insecurity growing now. The Orire children, those who are caught, are being charged to court soon. If that happens in corruption cases, and the presidency, starting from that place, says, no, I will not. Look at what happened when Kemi Odeosun was accused of doing something wrong. She resigned. That is what should happen when you are, and that shows a presidency that is not allowing corruption in different things. But what you find is that there are double standards. In one case, it's okay to resign. In another case, someone is accused of corruption, steps down, and after a while is reintegrated. I spoke to a governor once. He was leaving office as governor, and he was then contesting for Senate. I said, Your Excellency, it doesn't quite make sense to me why you guys do this. If you are ruling the entire state for 4 years, 8 years, you now want to go and start representing a third of that same state. Is that not? I said, Dako, you guys, you have to understand that you have to remain in the corridors of power so that you know what is going on and can have influence. If the laws are being made by these guys who are formerly executive and are now going to make laws to sentence corrupt people to death, do you think that law will pass at all? Knowing themselves have done something wrong in time past. So they'll find every way to delay it. And until the number one person says, I will not have any more of this nonsense, that is when you actually see the fight against corruption take very strong head. Yes, they are trying now. The agencies are doing their best. But until we say, whether you're in government, whether you're in executive, whether you're a legislator, if you have been fingered for a crime, you will not be spared. A few governors have gone to jail before, but they have been pardoned, like you said. And until those kind of impunities stop, people will still continue to do what is wrong.
But I'm not sure that's good contribution that you have made to that, and you also heard Dr. Ade laugh at the fact that if they don't, I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, I can. Yes, I
can. He was laughing at the fact that he said if you set up a brilliant idea and you have corruptible judges, it's not going to go anywhere. But how about the code of conduct system that we have? Code of conduct bureau, code of conduct tribunal. Are they as active as they should be? One would have thought that that's a proactive initiative.
Like you said, the initiative is proactive, but are they as active as they should be? And when you get into office, you are supposed to declare your assets within a certain number of days. By the time you are leaving, you should also declare your assets. But who's monitoring it? Yeah. What is used more? It is used more as a trap to catch people who don't do it when you offend. We know you should do it, but nobody says anything until somebody wants to have you in and they go. You shouldn't run foreign accounts as a public officer, but who checks? Many public officers still have foreign accounts, and nobody is asking questions. It is only those that they want to set up that they say, oh, we checked, he still has foreign accounts. So the agencies are there, but they're not working hard enough on those issues.
Right, and how much better do you think we can do this now? We have a short time, we're closing now. Yeah. How much better do you think, we can do this? We have so many high-profile cases, as we said at the beginning. Nearly not enough of them are being, the process of prosecuting them, it seems as it drags on forever and ever and ever. How much better do you think we can do this, or is it the proper process that we're going through?
No, actually, and I would really appeal to the president. This current administration is doing a lot of fantastic reforms that can actually help this country, despite the pains. However, one thing the president should have at the back of his mind is that all of these reforms will not be worth of anything, will not amount to nothing if corruption persists at the current rate. So the president has to make this determination to, and unfortunately, you have a very active, very credible EFCC, ICPC, NDLEA. The agencies are doing their job, but the political leadership must resolve. There's no way all these reforms will help Nigeria get to where we should be if we don't deal with corruption. That's one. The second thing is that there should be consequences, and we should stop punishing the right people. We did it in Nigeria. We dealt with, we allowed Malami to deal with Magu. We allowed Buratai and General Oloni Shakin to deal with army officers who were wrongfully replaced for those who committed offenses. 38 officers were wrongful, and up to now the system has not self-corrected itself. We need to deal with that. It's only the judiciary that has an effective mechanism of self-correcting, even though it's not catching up enough, but it has a mechanism of but the political system needs to self-correct.
Well, we could go on, and I've heard you strongly about consequences. I've heard consequences directly or indirectly from you all gentlemen about this, that we don't have consequences that are strong enough to deter people. And even where the consequences are played out, they are reversed by pardon, state pardon. Interesting. Thank you so much for your time this morning, gentlemen. Sulaiman Arigwabu is Executive Secretary, Header Resource Center. Dr. Olubenga Adeoyo is a chartered accountant and tax expert, arbitrator, international business lawyer, and president Egba Economic Summit Group.
Very important.
Which is incorruptible.
Yes.
Mr. Tankwa Kyoshu is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes. When we return, we're talking about food or a lack of it.
Or a lack of it,
In a moment. Stay with us.